All right, so last time we were looking at this person data structure, and in our main method here, we were making two persons, and we were calling print old on both of them. Um, Now, originally, when we were talking about data types and such, um, I left one out, and this other data type, um, which is very useful to us, is a grouping of things. So essentially, the problem is, okay, I have these two people, but what if I want to put them together in like a group or a collection, and I want to pass that collection around without having to pass all these individual person objects around? And the solution to that is essentially something we call a list. So I'm going to declare a people value, and it's going to be a list of person. Um, Now these objects are a little bit different from the ones that we've been seeing because they take what's called a generic. Um, so essentially, it makes it so this list is a grouping of specific things. You can't put just anything in this group. Um, and in this specific language, we can't just declare a list. We need to declare a mutable list. Um, because we want to be able to add things and remove things from this list. Um, there are there's reasons why some lists you don't want to mutate and you only want to look at. But for the purposes of this, we want to be able to change our list um, and not have it stay the same. So we have this people. We can do people.add dot. We can do people.add Brandon. We say, okay, now we have this collection of two things. Um, and when dealing with these like collection sort of things, if I do people dot, I don't have access to any of like the attributes of an individual person anymore. So there's two primary methods of essentially like dealing with these collections. The first one, and the one that most people are taught in school, is this one where you go for person in people. And essentially now I get this is what's called iterating. So I go through every single person in my people object, and I have access to the person in here. So I could do person dot print old, and now essentially we're doing the same thing we did up here, but we don't have to have these two lines. Instead, we just do this, make sure we're doing the exact same thing there. Um, so if we run this, same thing. Tom's old to 24. Tom's old. Brand is not old. So the real, I guess I'll go to the other way. So the other way to mess with these kind of collections is what's called a streaming or a functional approach. So we can do people dot, instead of that for loop, we can do people dot for each. And you see it does this it comma person. That's the default parameter name. We can do person. So now old. So these two things do the exact same thing. Um, However, it gets a little bit more complicated when you start to add other logical things you want to do in this list. So, for example, in this edition, we would do if we wanted to put an if statement around here, age equals 24. That would essentially limit how like which printing old we're doing um, to only be people that have age 24. And I can add another person in this collection that has age of 24, and it will do print old for both of those. Now, for the approach down here, it's a little bit different. Um, Instead of putting the if inside of this, we add something that's called a filter. So essentially, We have our person there. We do person dot age equals 24. So these are like the two different ways of like doing this sort of logic flow. Um, this one is like it separates out what you need to do into these individual like functional steps, and this is kind of just like a bigger blob that can be easier to work with in some instances, but um, there are advantages and disadvantages to each one of these approaches. I personally prefer using this like functional style um, when I code things, but I mean ultimately a lot of this is personal preference. I mean coding is a lot like I don't know. I consider it more of like an art or something more akin to writing, where your style it has to work and it has to fit into like some norms, but a lot of it is left up to you as to how you want to do individual stuff. So now, if we run this again, we see Tom is old at 24 from this one, and Tom is old at 24 from this one. Um, and yeah, that's kind of like just the overview of collections.